From Florida. I'm going to be introducing our group to you today, and we'll be debating in-home ABA therapy versus TeleABA. So for our group, we have Sharon and Georgia, and she's going to be discussing the benefits of delivering services through web-based options, which is TeleABA. And then we've also got Stephanie in California and Allison in Pennsylvania, and they're both going to be discussing the pros of in-home ABA therapy and offering ethical considerations to more traditional approaches to ABA through an informal debate. We've got a couple of acronyms that I want to make you aware of that we're going to be using throughout the debate. We're going to be referring to board certified behavior analysts as BCBAs, the professional and ethical compliance code for behavior analysts as compliance codes or just codes, and also applied behavior analysis as ABA, as well as autism spectrum disorders as ASD. One of the main problems that parents with children who have ASD face is seeking out effective treatment for their children as early as possible to gain the long-term outcomes. ABA is an evidence-based and very effective treatment for autism. However, according to the World Health Organization, there is a significant lack of trained professionals in several fields such as speech pathology, special education, and most importantly, for the purpose of this debate, is BCBAs in isolated rural areas. So just to give you an example, according to the BACB website, there are only 7 practicing BCBAs in Wyoming, 36 in Alaska, 14 in Idaho, and 15 in North Dakota, and 20 in South Dakota. So I pulled up on the BACB's website of where I live, which is in St. Petersburg, Florida, and it's part of the Tampa Bay area. So I completed a 5-mile search for behavior analysts, and there were 49, including myself, that came up. So it included both BCBAs and BCABAs. So that's quite a difference compared to the other states that I mentioned. And some of the other states that I did mention are obviously areas that are not only spread out, but they have geographically challenging conditions, so it makes it harder to access them due to weather conditions, mountains, islands, or other things that could significantly affect the ability for children to access the ABA services. As a result, delivery of ABA via web-based services has increasingly been explored in many fields, including ABA, in order to train parents and other care providers on how to interact with individuals with ASD. Some people have raised ethical concerns about the development, implementation, and evaluation of behavior change programs when they're being implemented by less skilled individuals. And as a result of this, many individuals believe that in-home therapy or those that are delivered in a center or face-to-face are the most ethical approach to delivering these ABA services regardless of challenges that many face accessing the services. So throughout this debate, we're going to consider both sides of the issue, present some research, defend arguments to support the professional and ethical dilemmas involved in both delivering web-based services and also more traditional in-home ABA therapy. ABA is, very simply put, it's a scientific approach to teaching new behaviors or skills and reducing problem behaviors. According to Buteau and Hume in 2010, in the 1960s, there was a shift from treating clients in research laboratories to more applied and natural occurring settings, so generalization across environments could become more likely. Beowulf and Risley in 1968 discussed 7 dimensions of ABA, and one of those dimensions is the term applied, which is used to assess a target behavior and its social significance, not just simply out of convenience or its importance to theory. Many in the field of ABA would argue that in-home therapy provides the most substantial opportunity for behavior analysts to use dimension and apply their science, as in-home is naturally occurring and behaviors can be observed, assessed, and treated in the most naturally occurring setting. However, with the current autism prevalence rates at 1 in 68 individuals, and this is continuing to grow, how can BCBAs provide effective treatments to all of those individuals with ASD that are in need and throughout the entire country? Realistically, they can't. So in order to have a clear understanding of how web-based services can be delivered, let me just give you a brief background on TeleABA. So according to Bovair and his colleagues in 2010, the practice of TeleABA falls under the realm of what is known as telemedicine, telepractice, or telehealth, which all use web-based communication technologies to allow specialists in many different fields, in this case BCBAs, to conference with clients through the video-based software and consult on cases that are located in geographically challenging areas. So throughout the debate, we're going to focus on two main questions. The first being, does the need for remote ABA services outweigh the ethical issues that could be presented by using a web-based delivery system to individuals who may not be as qualified as a BCABA? And then the second question we're going to be addressing in the debate is, can treatment fidelity be maintained through the use of TeleABA?
So thanks for the introduction, Satori. And when a behavior analyst first takes on a client, they must first hold themselves to the highest standards of the profession, which also includes ensuring that scientific-based evidence supports their professional judgment. So we have to question ourselves, can I serve the best interests of the clients through consultation, maintaining confidentiality, and assessing the client's behavioral needs to meet Code 1.01? Then looking whether or not TeleABA is evidence-based, Bovair and his colleagues in 2010 approved 8 different studies that achieved successful implementation of TeleABA services. Code 1.01 doesn't necessarily define the number of actual evidence-based articles or provide an exact definition of what meets that criteria.
Although, Sharon, you're right, there is a body of literature to support the use of telepractice methods. After Bovair and colleagues in 2010 conducted a literature review to evaluate evidence-based criteria for TeleABA, they concluded that the literature is limited due to the number of participants, the quality of the studies, and experimental designs. Code 1.02 discusses how a behavior analyst should only take on clients who are within their realm of competence, experience, and training. However, there has been more in-depth and detailed research completed on direct in-person application of ABA therapy, and its procedures have been replicated more than any other form of therapy, and it is considered an effective, successful intervention, according to a statement by Weinerman in 2004.
So, Allison, while this is true, one could also argue that obtaining an online degree in ABA, such as one through Ball State University, to become a BCBA would also not meet the code of 1.02, as all educational criteria for online college degrees are almost exclusively completed through web-based services. These programs don't, if they didn't exist, there basically would be a shortage of BCBAs in these already underserved population groups. So Code 1.03 requires that BCBAs maintain competence through professional development, which is also gained through online paid services, such as companies through like Autism Training Solutions. And many registered behavior technicians, or RBTs, receive their initial 40-hour training through ATS-type services that were all delivered online. So I'd have to argue with you that TeleABA meets at least the same requirements for supervision provided by college professors through web-based services, in addition to saving time and money for those who live in remote areas. So the following video is going to show one company that has developed training for behavior analysts, but specifically RBTs, through more convenient online training. So let me cue up that video for you.
Online, somebody could start their training to get this qualification today.
That's right. We looked to the board's requirement when they put them out, and we felt like it was really important to address these training topics, and we released our e-learning at the beginning of March. And so we do have the 40 hours that are required for an employee, a staff person, to go through this training to become a registered behavior technician.
And it's separated into different modules, and you can buy them individually, or you can buy and pay for the whole training all at once.
Well, although the idea presented in your previous argument and in the video may be true, BCBAs must adhere to Code 1.0 for integrity, 2.02 for responsibility of all parties affected by ABA services, and as you mentioned, the entire section of 5.0, which holds BCBAs accountable for their everyday supervisory roles. TeleABA cannot ensure that a BCBA is fully responsible for their supervision if they cannot directly provide effective training and supervision to them, which in this case, the supervisees are often the client's parents.
So Allison, I completely agree with you, but the BCBA is required to supervise at least 5% of all hours worked with a client. So it would be absolutely impossible for them to have absolutely complete responsibility for their supervisees, even with in-home settings, unless cameras were basically set up to monitor their RBTs or BCABAs at all times, unless it was actually set up at a learning setting environment where the BCBA was present at all times.
Sharon, ABA therapy has been sanctioned by state and federal agencies, including the U.S. Surgeon General and the New York State Department of Health. In 1999, the United States Surgeon General stated that 30 years of research demonstrated the efficacy of applied behavioral methods in reducing inappropriate behavior and in increasing communication, learning, and appropriate social behavior, according to a study by Weinerman in 2004.
So Stephanie, I actually have to call you on the fact that you just stated the words "in 1999" while quoting a study from 2004. So I graduated from my bachelor's degree in 1994, and I was still using dial-up services in 1999 for internet. And in 2004, the CDC reported that autism prevalence rates were 1 in 166 children, whereas today it's 1 in 68.
Well, since then, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry have stated ABA techniques have repeatedly shown to be effective in reducing specific problem behaviors, increasing academic success, improving communication, social, employment, and living skills, ranging from preschool to adulthood. Many renowned organizations have spoken on the efficacy and successes of one-to-one direct ABA therapy, particularly in the home and classroom settings. Due to the empirical evidence, many scientific, government, and professional organizations have declared that ABA-based direct methods represent the best practices for individuals with ASD and intellectual disabilities, according to Hagopian et al. In 2014.
And I don't think that any of us are actually disputing that the fact that in-home therapy is the preferred method when and if it is actually possible. But when we're going back to the original statement of the problem, which is how do we actually ensure that ASD individuals gain accessibility to services? Wacker and his colleagues in 2013 found that TeleABA is an extremely affordable means for families to access interventions who don't have insurance coverage, and they're actually able to pay through cash. They estimated that telehealth sessions could cost an average of $58 an hour, so a 60-minute session versus $335 for a 60-minute session for a therapist to travel to a rural area to provide services in person.
While telehealth does allow for more accessibility, it is a fairly new treatment option, and it warrants more investigation, according to Schultzbacher and colleagues in 2004, especially when it comes to confidentiality. How is the TeleABA therapist able to ensure their client services are protected? The analyst has no control over who is in the house, who's coming in and out of the house, who may be listening in or can hear the teaching sessions. While Section 2.06 of the Ethical Code discusses the maintenance of confidentiality of clients, Part A of this code ensures the confidentiality of the client when a behavior when a behavior analyst provides consultation. And this is protected under the law, company guidelines, and professional relationships.
I'd like to add that Compliance Code 2.06c discusses the importance of using only minimal and pertinent information, specifying electronic information, which of course would put a client at risk if not on a secured network when contacting one another via TeleABA. Compliance Code 2.06e addresses how behavior analysts should not share or create situations that would identify the client, and an ABA session via the internet that could be hacked into, which would certainly expose the client to identification, especially if it was recorded. It could then even be uploaded to social media, which would violate codes 2.07, maintaining confidentiality.
So Stephanie Vismar and colleagues estimated in 2012 that about 77% of all U.S. homes had adequate internet access, making TeleABA services and their technologies a realistic option for all rural families. And by simply setting up a VPN connection, it would actually protect client information.
Although VPN services do help individuals protect their online information, there's no guarantee of this protection. And again, a BCBA is ultimately responsible for client privacy according to Ethical Code 8.05d, which addresses accountability of using digital media and must ensure that non-therapeutic media services or presentations are not used to enter into any agreement of services. This code doesn't prevent the use of TeleABA, but, however, prevents the solicitation of services when a behavior analyst is educating others about ABA through multimedia connections.
Allison, so Breitenstein and Gross in 2013 found that many behavioral interventions had low enrollment due to availability, access, and convenience when we were looking at in-person services. TeleABA has actually increased participation resulting from convenience, reduction in travel time, and costs. So you are correct that BCBAs must use caution when looking at digital media, but the entire section of 8.0 of the code state that all marketing of ABA and the use of digital media should not be used to solicit services for clients, which TeleABA does not use solicitation. The participants are actually already clients.
Although the internet has shown a great deal of advancements in educating and training providers through various forms of media, not enough evidence supports the effective training of parents at implementing interventions with their children, according to Heitzman-Powell et al. In 2014. Compliance Code 1.03 discusses the importance of maintaining credentials and competencies through professional development. While this is an aspect that can be upheld by behavior analysts to maintain their credentials, parents cannot be held to the standard just to serve their children. In-home ABA is easier to teach parents techniques in person. Parents are better able to learn the techniques through direct modeling. Questions and concerns can be answered immediately, and plans can be modified quickly with face-to-face collaboration. Learning in an environment one-on-one with individuals diagnosed with ASD can contribute to other types of skill development in their repertoire. For example, eye contact, responding to and initiating communication, and focusing on task completion could all be addressed in tandem with achieving target goals. Under Ethical Code 1.0, responsible conduct of a behavior analyst, the behavior analyst must maintain professional behavior when working with clients and families and assist only within the boundaries of competence, which is Compliance Code 1.02a. Compliance Code 2.02, responsibility to all parties affected by services, also applies.
So you ladies absolutely have some great arguments, but I'm not ready to call uncle yet because parental involvement is absolutely paramount. According to the National Autism Center, parental training and involvement are critical to the outcomes of children with ASD. According to Heitzman, Powell, and colleagues in 2014, TeleABA allowed parents to access valuable training while implementing procedures in their natural environments. The nature of TeleABA not only involves parental involvement, but Code 2.02 is important for behavior analysts to ensure that anyone who is affected by TeleABA may be serving in a therapeutic role also understands that supervision is required for them to maintain their roles. So TeleABA expects the parent to not only be the client, but also consent to the interventions on behalf of their client and to become a supervisee. So Code 5.05 ensures that clear criteria for supervision is provided prior to the onset of therapy. And 5.06a sets out the expectations for the feedback and for the reinforcement for their feedback. I've conducted in-home therapy where the parent uses therapeutic time basically for a 3-hour babysitting session rather than learning to interact with their child. So in-home doesn't always increase parental involvement, whereas TeleABA absolutely requires parental participation.
Well, Sharon, in-home ABA therapy allows a qualified behavior analyst to observe the client in his or her own natural environment, up close and personal, providing opportunities to establish family and client rapport and to get a clear idea of the functional behavior and its maintaining variables through direct observation while maintaining professional and ethical boundaries. The direct service in the home allows the BCBA the accessibility of discerning parental reactions, participation, and performance in carrying out the procedures established in the intervention.
Thanks, Allison. You provided a really good description of in-home ABA therapy. We're going to play a short video clip about in-home ABA therapy for you.
It's objective based, and I think just meshing everybody together, the support is just amazing.
Children's Care in-home behavior therapists Catherine and Carrie began working with Benjamin. They taught him how to make appropriate requests, making choices, self-help skills like dressing himself, washing his hands and face, taking a bath, and washing his hair, transitioning to activities, independent play skills, taking turns, sharing, interacting appropriately with peers at preschool, and requesting help.
So overall, TeleABA is a viable option for individuals who have geographical challenges and can certainly meet the needs of those ASD individuals. However, there are many ethical pitfalls that a BCBA must be hyper aware of when deciding to take on clients via TeleABA. Many of the BACB codes are at risk of being broken if due diligence is not taken to ensure compliance is met.
Thanks, Stephanie. All right, ladies, you guys have provided some really great arguments regarding the ethical issues of TeleABA. Let's move on to the next question we're going to address in this debate, which is whether or not treatment fidelity can be maintained through the use of TeleABA.
In-home ABA therapy intervention maintains high fidelity in treating severe behaviors by offering personalized interaction in the natural setting, where the BCBA can get the entire view of the environment, assess personal interaction between family members, and then design, supervise, and modify treatments as needed.
So although in-person can give that full view of the household and how it runs, nothing stops the BCBA from actually coming out in person a few times to actually get those views themselves. Generally, an RBT with 40 hours of training and is certified by a BCBA is the one who's actually implementing the interventions. So nothing limits the parent from actually taking the RBT course themselves, and TeleABA can certainly have quarterly training in rural areas by the BCBA at the nearest largest city or town so that they can get some up-to-date training and get some feedback as their own RBTs from the BCBA. My own BCBA piggybacks all of her supervision, and she lives 3 hours from 4 of her local RBTs. So we work in a school setting, and she almost never talks to any of the parents in the sessions because they're basically not present. So we've done Google Hangouts for supervisions remotely and had to pull the child into a private room in order to meet supervision requirements. And that's definitely not what one would call a natural environment.
Sharon, ABA usually starts with a functional behavior assessment to determine what behaviors are needed to be assessed. ABA places an emphasis on the important roles of consequences, antecedents, promoting positive behavior, minimizing the likelihood of challenging behavior, and establishing programming for generalization of skills to the natural environment, people, activities, and settings. How effective and thorough can an FBA be performed through TeleABA if a child knows that they are being watched?
So Stephanie, you do bring up a good point that initially there could be many challenges that come about. There is a program called Right Signature that's available that is a digital-based program so that all initial consent forms and review of all responsibilities can be sent indirectly and reviewed digitally so that the parent can sign off on it. And then once consent has been obtained, TeleABA allows for multiple interviews with multiple people to schedule convenient times to meet, easy and quick follow-ups. Parents could videotape times when particular behaviors are happening so that they can actually get a good topography of what the behavior looks like. And nothing states, again, like the BCBA can't come out periodically. So I'm not saying that it might not take longer to gather this data, but it can be done. Google Hangouts is just one meeting mode that allows BCBAs to turn off their side of the camera so that the child does not know that they're being observed. So it allows the child to act in a more natural way without having, when there's somebody there in person, it completely changes the environment. And the child is completely aware that someone else is available. There are also many apps available for iPads and smartphones for portability. And many insurance companies like TRICARE will actually cover the cost of an iPad for a child that has like language impairments, so that a lot of these topographies can be recorded in natural settings like grocery stores.
Although you said that very well, Sharon, what about some of the additional components of ABA that focus on the use of prompts? For example, verbal, gestural, and physical prompting are often used to encourage correct responding. How would one go about ensuring that a parent could successfully facilitate these procedures through a television screen? Also, accurate data collection and documentation is extremely important when conducting an effective behavior intervention. How can a TeleABA therapist determine if appropriate and accurate data collection is being taken effectively, or if the plan needs immediate modification? Code 2.11 ensures client overall well-being and autonomy, which the BCBA must abide.
So Allison, how do we know that our RBTs are maintaining accurate records with collection data in-home if a BCBA is not always present? A center-based environment is always the best mode to go, where a BCBA is always present if they want to monitor their employees 100% of the time. So there needs to be trust, involvement, irregardless of whether or not you're doing in-home or TeleABA. So nobody's more vested in their child's well-being than a parent. And again, BCBAs can hold that quarterly training locally and make sure that the parents gain some example scenarios to test their knowledge. And I agree that TeleABA is not as reactionary, but it does allow parents access to an option that they would not otherwise have.
In 2004, Weinerman discussed how procedures are used to strengthen existing skills and build on those that have not yet developed. They must be individualized for each child's abilities, levels of functioning, behavioral repertoire, and proficiency levels. ABA can combine some or all of these features through things like reward systems, behavioral contracts, timeouts, and removing privileges. These programs, however, emphasize modifying the individual's environments or settings to accommodate their learning needs. How do you see these kinds of adaptations being constantly done when a BCBA only has a two-dimensional view of the home, or if the parent only shows the BCBA what they want them to see. Behavior analysts conducting ABA procedures abide by the Ethical Code 2.09 to ensure effective consumer treatment and intervention is provided.
So one study that showed that TeleABA was proven through a study was with a functional communication training, which has shown that 93.5% reduction in problematic behaviors, and parents had little to no prior experience at all in ABA implementation of functional communication training. This was the Wacker study that we talked about earlier, that was completed in 2013, and it showed that an average family lived 222 miles from the nearest regional therapeutic clinic. So sessions were conducted during 60-minute weekly sessions via teleconferencing. Code 4.07a looks at environmental conditions of a behavior change program. So the client would be implementing the changes in a natural environment under the supervision and guidance of a BCBA. And Code 4.07b discusses how the behavior analysts work to overcome environmental constraints for that client.
Okay, Sharon, but let's keep in mind that in the study, participants only had to drive an average of 12 miles to a clinic where the sessions were being monitored, which would not be considered a natural environment. At that clinic, while they were ensured secured and reliable web-based services with a well-trained professional, this would not be an accurate comparison of TeleABA. Which brings me back to my original point that not enough evidence is available to support TeleABA in practice.
Well, another evidence-based study would be the Breitenstein and Gross study in 2013 that looked at fidelity ratings through their OASIS program, or Online Applied System for Intervention Skills Training Program. This was actually a program that had high-quality, flexible training for parents that were taught to implement ABA procedures with supervision of a BCBA while continuously monitoring the progress of ASD individuals. So according to Heitzman and Powell, many of the interventions taught by parents through the OASIS included discrete trial training, prompting, fading, shaping, chaining, reinforcement, punishment, data collection, generalization, and maintenance. So there were a total of 8 modules that they had to go through that included an introduction to autism and behavioral treatment, defining and observing behavior, principles of behavior, stimulus control, effective training practices, how to decrease behaviors with antecedent control and with consequential control, and then putting it all together. So basically, parents completed all of these online tutorials and then got online coaching sessions. So it wasn't like they just were coached and said, hey, go at it. They had to actually take the training online, then they were coached, and then it was all implemented. And OASIS showed that they had an overall increase of implementation of 41%, of an increase of knowledge of ABA, and 39% with parents that had the lowest, 39% of implementation, and parents who had the lowest educational background showed the highest knowledge increases of up to 90%, which is pretty amazing. So this study actually shows that TeleABA can be explained to parents and meet Code 4.05 on displaying the objectives of behavior change programs before implementation and using risk-benefit analysis of a program, and also Code 1.01 of relying on scientific knowledge.
Sharon, while the OASIS information is indeed impressive, one also needs to keep in mind that dual or exploitive relationships could occur, as the parent is not only the client but are also serving in the role of the supervisee. This means that the parent would have to not only agree to the behavior change programs as the client, but also agree in writing ahead of the intervention of services that all relationships were clearly defined per Code 1.06, and also ensure that Code 5.05, communication of all supervisory conditions, were communicated and defined. This could be a fine line.
Stephanie, exploitive and dual relationships are even more likely to happen within home settings as a result of direct contact with clients and supervisors with their supervisees. And that's why there is a code of conduct. I've seen RBTs become very close friends with their clients, and companies look the other way. And I've seen where low service options having BCBAs treat their own children, and people still look the other way for fear that services will go away altogether. So the fact is that TeleABA keeps relationships basically separated and at a distance compared to in-home, and avoids other pitfalls such as gift giving. And professional BCBAs with high ethical standards would ensure that these issues were properly addressed regardless of the settings of the services.
I can see what you're saying about the possibility of multiple relationships, but there are other factors to consider that assist in setting boundaries and to help avoid and prevent these relationships. For example, Karada in 2013 provided a few guidelines that parents can follow to effectively directly implement ABA in their homes. Some of these guidelines included parents completing observations, creating goals and objectives, understanding the procedures of intervention, tracking progress, and acting as an effective team member while they have exclusive involvement in the process while they are working with the in-home therapist.
And Allison, you know, I'm 100% on board with you that a primary caregiver should have maximum involvement. And according to Heitzman Powell in 2014, the primary caregiver tends to be the mother. And evidence shows that when fathers were actually more involved in their children's therapy, better outcomes were significantly achieved, and there was a significant reduction in stress levels for the mothers. And as a parent of two autistic children myself with a deployed husband, I can attest to you that it is very stressful being a mother and trying to fight for her children alone.
Sharon, just to keep you true to the study and not to misinterpret that data, also keep in mind that the fathers in the study were trained secondhand by their spouse. Therefore, there was note that a possible risk of reducing treatment fidelity when fathers implement procedures could have occurred. Compliance Code 5.04 discusses how BCBAs ensure appropriate training procedures are implemented effectively. If the father is trained secondhand from the mother who has not mastered the procedures herself, then the procedure will not be implemented with fidelity.
Stephanie, you're absolutely right that the sessions held through TeleABA required that all parties agree to measurements and be present during TeleABA sessions for treatment fidelity to occur. So I think that fathers could be used for inter-observer agreement if they cannot be present for all TeleABA sessions. So they could definitely play an active role in data collection. And although mothers still showed a greater involvement in training, overall implementation and communication with coaches increased, according to the Heitzman Powell study. So Code 5.07 provides ongoing evaluation of the supervision of the family activities and helps ensure that there's continuity across both parties.
Thanks, Sharon. So we've listened to some really great arguments from both sides regarding TeleABA and also in-home ABA therapy. And despite all of the amazing arguments that Sharon pointed out about the pros of TeleABA and why it can be so beneficial and convenient, we do as a group feel that in-home ABA therapy is always the best option because of the simple fact that it is evidence-based, and currently there is very limited research on TeleABA to date. So we've got some audience questions that we're going to answer. The first question we have is TeleABA going to be more expensive than in-home therapy? I'll go ahead and answer that one. Wacker et al. In 2013 estimated that a 60-minute telehealth session cost an average of $58 an hour versus $335 for a therapist to travel to a rural area to provide services in person. The next question we have here is, what kind of technology do I need to participate in TeleABA from my home?
So I can answer that one, and the first thing would be that they need high-speed internet services, of course a laptop computer with either an internal or external connected microphone and a web camera, and then downloading free software such as Google Hangouts. And Bovera et al. Found that most studies that they looked at either use Skype or iChat for teleconferencing software.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Our next question that we've got from the audience is, my child is only 3 years old and was just diagnosed with autism, but we live 60 miles away from the nearest therapist. Is it unrealistic for me to drive every day to therapy? What are my options for early intervention?
The benefits of TeleABA do become clear when looking at the rising statistics of autism prevalence and the challenges of living in geographical locations that do not have BCBAs. I think the best bet here would be to look into an early intervention TeleABA program.
Thanks, Allison. We've got one more question, which is ABA therapy a cure for autism?
I'll answer that one. So currently there is not a cure for autism, but ABA is a widely recognized as the most single effective therapy for children with autism spectrum disorders, providing substantial short and long-term lasting improvements in their lives continuing throughout adulthood. Under Code 2.9a, analysts have the obligation to advocate and educate the client and parents or guardians about the most effective scientifically proven treatment procedures available.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. That concludes our questions from the audience and our debate. We just want to thank you guys for listening and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.